Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. This Tuesday, capping 2 days of celebrations, commemorations, and speeches in Berlin, marking the 50th anniversary of the Élysée Treaty, a treaty that was signed at the French presidential palace that sealed the common fate of France and Germany. With us to talk about it for part two of our discussion, Jacques Millard, member of the French Parliament from the opposition Conservatives, Thomas Friang of Europhile think tank Europa Nova. With us, he's the head of high-tech startup Tiny Clues, Jakob Hessler, a German in Paris. And from Berlin's Technische Universität, Marcus Kerber joins us. We were sparring a bit on some of the issues regarding the Franco-German couple in part one of our discussion. Enough cynicism. A recent poll commissioned for the German embassy in Paris found 72% of the French, 85% of the Germans have a positive opinion of their neighbors. Great numbers. Let's look at the fine print, though. The problem lies elsewhere. 10% of the Germans say they respect the French, 1/3 only the other way around. And while 65% of the Germans say they feel sympathy for the French, look at the other way around. Well, it's a river of indifference we see across the Rhine. I'm going to turn to you at this point, Jakob Hessler, and ask you, when you look at those numbers and in the workplace, do you sense that sort of indifference to things that are happening in Germany when you live in France? And are there a lot of quid pro quos when you're a German working in a French on French soil?
No, actually, even before creating my own company or co-creating it, I worked in a larger French company and I worked for many large French companies. It was never really an issue. And I think at the level of where we are, all educated people, we can just move beyond states and work in many, many places. I think the key observation is a lack of understanding. When I read German newspapers, even some of the correspondents in Paris, how they interpret what happens in Paris, I sometimes feel I'm not in the same country, and vice versa. I feel that there's, well, not everyone has a refreshing style as Arnaud Le Parmentier, but I feel that there's a true lack of communication and of understanding what the others do and how they do. Obviously, that fuels the nice stereotypes. So the Germans will find the French a little too light. You know, it has a long literary tradition. In Minna von Barnhelm, there's this figure of the French. It's called Rico de la Marnière, who says, "Corrigez la fortune if the world is not exactly how you want." And you can imagine the French with all the, prejudices they have towards the Germans, which are fine and you will never eradicate them. The question really, though, is there is a lack of basic understanding the French, what are the contingencies of the German economic and political system, and vice versa. And that has to be addressed.
Just one thing, Jakob Hessler, it gets worse when we look at the key words when you say, for instance, to a Frenchman, what he thinks when you say the word Germany. We can show you. That's the poll. Words associated with Germany: Angela Merkel, 29%; beer, 23%; Berlin, 21%; cars, 18%. Okay, let's look at French words associated with France: Paris, 56%; Eiffel Tower, 37%; wine, croissant or baguette; good food, cheese. Basically, if I understand this poll correctly, our country looks like a restaurant to you.
At the first stage of the Eiffel Tower, right?
Well, you could argue, and it's the real difficulty, to say something provocatively, is that one of the biggest export industries for France, if you wish, is tourism, and you don't want to become the Disneyland of the world, despite the fact that it's a very beautiful country and many people want to go there, and that's the key thing. The key issue is about industrialization in France and industrial strength in France. And that is indeed where maybe the Germans have done some painful reforms a couple of years ago that the French are currently undergoing, and that, that are the real test for whether and how, and independently of Europe, because I think in part some of the dissatisfaction with Europe is the projection of the fact that France has the Germans have this word Reformstau. There's like an embouteillage. It's like it doesn't move, and there are so many, and they're piling up, and they're piling up, and they're piling up. And the real litmus test will be that. And Europe will be secondary, will take care of itself once that works.
Let me ask, because we're pleased to be joined by Elmar Brok. He is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament. He joins us from Brussels. He's from the ruling Christian Democrats. Thanks for being with us. Do you feel this sort of quid pro quo, the way that was just described there by Jakob Häsler, between how the French understand Germany and how the Germans understand France?
Yes, I think we have different cultural backgrounds and we have different economic philosophies. But until now, mostly we made it to find a proper compromise, which was a compromise with Europe and was leading Europe forward. And I think we should hear the possibility of the Élysée Treaty more than we did perhaps in the last years. The Council for Economic and Financial Affairs, for example, which was set up by President Mitterrand, Chancellor Kohl, should play perhaps a more productive role to prepare decisions to overcome such difficulties that we can have this leadership together in Europe again.
All right, so some of the remarks coming today out of Berlin, award-winning filmmaker Wim Wenders summed up how for him it seems the fizz has sometimes faded in that Franco-German couple.
Je suis un enfant de cette amitié. C'est ce qu'il y avait de plus excitant quand j'étais jeune. Le français, c'était mon premier langage. Ma première voiture, c'était une 2 chevaux. Mon premier grand voyage tout seul et mes études, j'étais à Paris. Il y a un peu une certaine indifférence, mais ça ne m'étonne pas après 50 ans de mariage.
After 50 years of marriage. Thomas Friong, you're from Eastern France.
I am.
I grew up there when I was young. And when I was young, in kindergarten, they made you learn German as a way of bringing the two countries together. Today, that's considered not important or not as important.
Yeah, even more than that, I've passed the baccalaureate and the abitur at the same time, so I'm kind of Génération Abibac, which is both on the same way of learning history, geography, literature. And what it taught me most is that when you hear François Hollande at his speech of Le Bourget saying that he wants a new Élysée Treaty in January 2013, and that it does not show up, it means something. It means really something. And what is important is you've shown funny figures a few minutes back, but I've taken other figures that are at the very heart of this Franco-German relationship today. Is that in terms of working force costs, it costs 33 euros per hour in France and 29 euros per hour in Germany to employ someone. And the benefits taxation is 34% in France and 30 in Germany, which means that there is a gap of an amazing gap of competitiveness between the two countries. And this is what is at the very heart of the Euro crisis today.
Of course, German women don't get the childcare they need if they want to take a leave of absence to have a baby.
Yeah,
There's a lot of...
And you have people paid 400 euro a month when, of course, we have a minimum wages in France.
Yeah, but
those are structural difference. I'm sorry.
No, the structural difference is that in
structural
Germany there are
difference
5%
is that
people
we are led.
France 10 people.
We are on the framework of a unique currency, single currency, which is inadequate for 9 out of 10 countries in this
Excuse
country.
me, sir, but you can't be saying that.
This is a
the
fact.
euro is only a mirror to show you the reforms you have not carried on.
Don't play foolish with that. Euro is the main structural problem that we are going to have
I'm
in
sorry,
Europe.
sir, but the
We
euro
are
is a
in
mirror
Europe.
that shows
And
you
secondly,
you
to
can't
that,
face the music.
Of course, we don't have the industry that Germany had coming from history, because when Germany is exporting, they are exporting machinery, heavy chemistry, in which France doesn't have any more exports. So you see, it's a structural difference between the two countries. I agree with you that there is no, absolutely no problem to work with the Germans on an enterprise basis. Everyone says to me that this is very convenient to work with the German and the German with the French.
Excuse me,
but
sir,
the
but if
point
you do
is
believe
the structural difference between the two countries.
Jakob Häsler.
Yeah, the structural. I think on the structural side, I think one needs to have a slightly more, nuanced view, which is the problem with the lack of industry competitiveness in France is not a problem of the wage. The wage differences are there, but the real problem, the wages that all these German Mittelstand that do all these export to China, they pay way higher wages
Yes.
than minimum wages in France. And the fact that in Germany it has these 400 euro jobs, the 400 euro jobs in France, in Germany, are only actually, or mostly in the service sector, which is not competing for export. So in the end, you have it, and that creates a slightly different
There is
question
an
about
exception,
social choice
my friend.
and
There is an
about
exception.
the euro. Just to say the
let-
last.
let- just-
There is an exception. Is that, you know, the German industry has a big advantage because they have production in Czechia, for instance, which is out of the Eurozone, and they import at a weak currency and they export in a high currency. Secondly, never
France does the
forget
same with
that
its car industry,
we French made big mistakes because we have taxed the capital. France, between 1995 and 2005, has been the world leader in exporting savings capitals, which did not invest in this country because of the ISF.
All right,
That
on the
means
one hand,
the
okay.
income on capital.
There's differences on industry, and as you mentioned rightly, differences in the way small businesses are run. But there's also big business projects, and I want to ask Elmar Brok about this. The most spectacular example of a misfire we've seen of late is the failed marriage between the aerospace giant EADS and BAE. That merger was nixed by Berlin. Was that the right thing to do? Elmar Brok?
No, I think you mean the merger with BAE.
What does it say about the Franco-German couple?
I think this was not done by Germany because also the German government were against that merger under that conditions. But we believe, and that is a difference, that, as was said before, that despite all the problems we might have because of difficult starting points, that we have always to look into the productivity of every economy. It doesn't matter which type of economy it is, which type of industry it is. And I think here we have to be more careful. And I think in Germany, not just the state, but also the companies have done in the last decade a lot. This is not forever. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Germany was the ill man at the River Rhine, and the Rhineland capitalism was finished, we were told internationally. And now it was changed by governmental, parliamentarian, and by industry-related reforms. And this made a competitiveness, and therefore we should not make so much a question about it. I believe that also France is able to do these structural changes to become more competitive and do not rely so much on state-influenced industries which have not the competitive wish inside the company as Germany, family-owned, medium-sized companies have, which are so successful in exports.
All right, the state-run way of doing business. I know you have to go, so I want to thank you, Elmar Brok, for joining us from Brussels. Quick word on that.
Yeah, two quick words. One is on the family-sized businesses.
To make a comment on what
one the
if that is possible.
Let me let Marcus Kerber break in because he's in Berlin. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, I think the failure of the merger between BAE and EADS is quite significant. It does not show that Germany has any particular nationalistic interests, but it shows that power sharing in international companies is a big problem. In that particular case, the failure is due to the behavior of a man called Tom Enders, who didn't even want to consult with the German government before taking very, very important preparatory measures to pave the way for a merger. But if we look in general in the field of industrial cooperation, the balance sheet is totally negative between Germany and France, due not to the fact that one country is more or less competitive as the other one, but due to the fact that the mentality of the managers and the culture of the corporations are totally different. I would even say incompatible. So this is due, all right, for not the merger, but the cooperation between Siemens and Areva It is a matter of fact for EIDS, where we have two different cultures of two different corporate cultures battling with each other. Germans against the French, and it's a battle between, it's a clash of civilizations. And let's take this for granted. And it goes on, it has gone on in other industrial corporations. As you know, with Sanofi, the adventure about Aventis was quickly over, and Sanofi took over a truly European company baptized Aventis. So,
Right, so
if we don't make progress in that field, and if we do not create a common corporate culture, and if we continue to organize big corporations like EIDS according to quota, according to passports, according to nationalities, Europe will not make the progress Europe should or is bound to make.
Very interesting. So in other
in the
words,
field
it doesn't just have to happen at the political level, it also has to happen at the corporate level. One final question, because it's an important one. The future of the Franco-German couple, of course, as we've been discussing, impacts the rest of Europe, Paris and Berlin, which this Tuesday promised that they'll have moves to solidify Europe's economic and currency union. They're at the heart of the Eurozone, as you can see on the map, and at the heart of Europe. But now the imbalance between France and Germany we've been discussing could be affected very much so by what David Cameron says Wednesday when he finally makes his big European policy speech in London. If Britain disengages further from Europe, how will it affect that imbalance in the Franco-German couple? Jacques Millard, you mentioned how France and the UK are natural allies when it comes to things like defense. If Britain shies away further, does that change fundamentally Europe?
You know, in fact, Britain belongs to the Euro system, to the European system. And the point, why do we have problems? Because we dream an utopian world, an integrated own state Europe. That will never exist.
So what David Cameron says tomorrow will be irrelevant in the long run?
No, the point is that, of course, they can say, because this is not the Britain who really went away from Europe. This is the so-called federalists who want to build one state. And this will not work. This will not work. And this is why I say we need European cooperation between the French. And this is true. We don't need to have a political enterprise. Sometimes the German can take the lead in such a field. We can take the lead on the other. Look at how Dassault industry is working. Dassault is leading. There is a pilot in the company. They are leading, and other European companies come and integrate on a single project. This is the way we should do, and not try to build, those huge machinery which will not work because they are based on a political inequality.
So a Europe of nations. It sounds
this
like
is the European of nations.
We're back at square one.
Which will work.
And I want to thank you, Jacques Millard. I also want to thank Thomas Friand. I also want to thank for being with us Jakob Hessler, Marcus Kerber for joining us from Berlin as well. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.